Warning: if you found my pirate voice to be a bit too much, then strap in. Viewer discretion is advised. Whether you call him the Phantom or Mr. Cauldron, he possesses an army of thrills and chills. Long live the Horned King. The Horned King does a lot of his damage through his minions. Yes, for the first time, Epic Alliances has provided us with some minions. Not those minions, the Cauldronborn. The Cauldronborn can do the King's dirty work for him, blocking the way and making life harder for his enemies. They each have 1 health and only come out in certain circumstances, but we'll talk about those a bit more later. For now, let's get a look under the hood at the Horned King and his character card. Like most characters, the Horned King provides a hand size of 2 and hits for 2 damage. The thing that stands out though is the movement speed. He can only move 1 space instead of 2. His health stands out at a decent 8, while he's worth 6 VP. His health is in a bit of a odd place for 6 VP, but it still feels right for him. Go forth, my deathless warriors, destroy all in your path. The Cauldronborn go on the forced march. With it, you send a Cauldronborn up to 2 spaces. It may not seem like much, but it's free movement for your minion. This is especially valuable since the king can't move much by himself. Block a VP space or move to protect your king. Soon the Black Cauldron will be mine. It's his constant ability, and each time he gains VP, a Cauldronborn joins the fight in an unoccupied adjacent space. By the way, each time I mention adding a Cauldronborn going forward, it only works if he has less than 3 on the board. This is his primary method of birthing his minions, and it impacts how you want to play him. It's easy to be overwhelmed by his wretched army. At the beginning of each rival starting phase, they take 1 damage for each Cauldronborn that is adjacent to. This upgrade's effectiveness is dependent on the placement of your minions and how many you have on the board. If you have a decent amount up, this can start a mad rush by your opponent to eliminate them, potentially giving your characters the time needed to act. However, it could also be underwhelming if you don't have a lot of opportunities to place them nearby. Your mileage will vary. Perhaps it would interest you to see what fate has in store for you, or at least with this deck. So, let's go through the Horned King's cards and break it down a little further. I'll be going from most common to least common as some cards appear in the deck multiple times. The first card appears 3 times. The Horned King has plenty of foul followers. It's an action and movement card, so it works for either phase. The King and one of his Cauldronborn each move up to 2 spaces. Then, both that Cauldronborn and the King do 1 damage to an adjacent rival. Having a card that can be used as a movement or action card is always useful, but it's especially important since you can get damage done during the movement phase. It's also good to get some solid movement in for a character that needs it. The King seeks to feed the Cauldron. Banish up to 2 cards from a summoner's discard pile. Then add 1 Cauldronborn, and finally, one of those Cauldronborn does 2 damage to an adjacent rival. The Horned King is pretty good at denying upgrades to his rivals, and this is why. Figure out the cards that your opponent needs to upgrade or recall, and then take them away. Not to mention, it's a good way to get another minion on the board. Our hour has arrived. One of his Cauldronborn does 3 damage to an adjacent rival. Then, if that rival is upgraded, flip that upgrade back over. 3 damage is pretty average, but reversing the upgrade can be devastating to certain characters. Stitch, Mickey, Gaston, and Jack, along with many others, really appreciate their upgrades and don't want to go without them. Sure, they can upgrade themselves again, but maybe they can't. It can irreversibly change your opponent's strategy. The rest of his cards only appear once each. Rise, Cauldronborn! This card brings 1 Cauldronborn onto the field in an adjacent spot. Then, each Cauldronborn does 1 damage to each adjacent rival. The effectiveness of this card is dependent on the amount of Cauldronborn and their placement. However, in the right circumstances, it can do 2 to 3 damage to multiple opponents. Gauge the situational damage, but make sure you take advantage of the opportunity to place another Cauldronborn. The Cauldronborn are led by Insidious Command. Each Cauldronborn deals 1 damage to an adjacent rival. Then, for each rival damaged this way, 1 magic card is moved from a discard pile into its owner's deck. You can use this card on an opponent to deny them an upgrade, but it's more likely you're going to use it to bring back valuable magic cards for yourself. Go forth and destroy. Move 2 spaces and place a Cauldron into an adjacent space. Obviously getting more movement is useful, but so is placing a Cauldron. This is a useful card to get early game when you like to move them around further and establish your minions. So does the Horned King rule, or should he be usurped? The Horned King plays differently than most of the cast. He moves slowly, doesn't do much damage by himself, and he relies on scoring VP first to be successful. If you focus on that, you may wonder why he's worth 6 VP. However, once you consider what makes him unique, things really open up for him. There aren't a lot of characters that can manipulate the board and space people out. The Horned King with his Cauldron make a miniature army to attack or defend. Gaston might be able to hit hard, but he's going to have trouble fighting through an undead army too deep. Sure, the Cauldron only have 1 health each and are easy to take out, but if you're spending time hitting them, it's time spent not hitting the characters that are actually worth VP. Honestly, these minions have several uses. They can cover up VP spaces, so you can deny them from being used by other teams. But it can also be a safer way to extend the Horned King's range of damage, or even split up 2 allies in order to divide and conquer. There's 3 things to watch out for when playing as the Horned King. First of all, he has low movement. This can be mitigated a bit by the minions, but realize that it takes some time to get him up and running. However, it can leave him to be an open target. The second thing is that if you go up against someone who can attack groups, many of your minions can go up in smoke quickly. The third thing is that when you specialize in doing small and direct damage multiple times, you can get caught up by stealthy or tough tactics. The Horned King's strengths lie in the fact that the Cauldron can split and control the structure of the board in a way that no one else can. He is uniquely qualified to combat and challenge his opponent's ability to upgrade. The Horned King may not move quickly, but thanks to his minions, he can reach further than most of the cast. Meanwhile, he does have some weaknesses to work around. Being able to move only 1 space is a huge hindrance, not only in his ability to reach important spaces, but to escape danger. Since the Cauldron are only worth 1 HP, they can quickly be wiped out by group attacks. If you aren't gaining VP and developing minions, the king can feel like his horns are no longer sharp. The Horned King is unique in this game, and so are his needs. The king wants allies who can gain VP quickly or easily. That way he can rapidly birth his Cauldron. He's also a magic user. Every one of his cards is a magic card, which gives him immediate synergy with some of the others. Finally, keep in mind that he can sometimes use his Cauldron to cut off a portion of the board, which is useful to characters that perform long distance attacks or need some time to get up and running. So, who is worthy to be enlisted into the Kingsguard? The Horned King, Ariel, and Gaston. The name of the game with this team is about board control and card advantage. The Horned King is capable of manipulating the board and spacing characters out. Gaston favors isolated characters so that he can bully them. Ariel, meanwhile, provides the healing and extra cards needed to upgrade quickly and keep your opponent from focusing on too many targets. Your opponent is unlikely to target the Cauldron often when they have to worry about Ariel healing her allies. Otherwise, they'll have trouble gaining enough VP. Jack, Dr. Facilier, and the Horned King. This team supports each other magically and status-wise. Facilier does what he typically does, distributing statuses, but is supported by Jack's skill and the King's magic cards. Jack's job is to keep control of status effects. He can keep tough and stealthy from being an issue, but can also combine Afraid with the Cauldron to give the opponent no options on where to go. The Horned King uses his minions to control the board and continues to limit his opponent's actions. He also prevents certain upgrades from turning the tide. On paper, this team has low offense, but it should also keep your opponent from doing too much damage as well. So that's our breakdown of the Horned King. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to stick around for our next breakdown, but until then, arise, my messengers of death. Our time has arrived. See you next time.